It was dark, dark in the forest. Two kids were walking home from school. Suddenly they heard footsteps behind them. They started running. They could hear the footsteps getting closer. Then they turned around and saw a horrible goblin with a big pot belly. He was hobbling towards them, dragging himself on the ground. The kids started screaming, and then they ran as fast as they could. They ran past their school, past their houses, but the goblin kept following them. Finally, they reached a river. They were too scared to look back. They didn't want to see that horrible goblin with his big pot belly. They jumped into the water and started swimming to the other side. When they reached the other side, they turned around and saw the goblin standing on the bank. He had a big knife in his hand, and he was smiling at them. The kids screamed and ran away. They ran and they ran until they couldn't run anymore. They were so tired. Then they looked back. The goblin wasn't there. Maybe he wasn't real. Maybe it was just a dream. But when they turned around, they saw him again. He was sitting on a rock, and he was taking his time to eat an apple. He took a bite of the apple and said, "This is a very nice apple." Then he looked up and he saw the kids looking at him. He smiled at them and said, "Would you like an apple too?" The kids shook their heads. They didn't want an apple from a goblin. The goblin got up and started walking towards them. The kids started running. They ran, and they ran until they reached the village. When the villagers saw the goblin, they started screaming. They had never seen a goblin before. The goblin just smiled and kept walking. He wasn't afraid of the villagers. He wasn't even afraid of their dogs. The kids were hiding behind a house. They were too scared to come out. They didn't want the goblin to find them. They stayed there until it was dark, dark. When they finally came out, the goblin was gone. The next day at school, all the kids were talking about the goblin. They were telling scary stories about him, but the two kids knew that the stories weren't true. They knew that the goblin wasn't real. He wasn't a monster. He was just a lonely old man who liked to eat apples. The end.